So we got up to Daf Lamed Zayin Amid Beis, and we're up to the top of the Amud, Omar Abaye. So we're saying the following. We have Machlokes Abaye v'Rava min hakotzel hakotzel, from one extreme to the other, as far as Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is concerned. Abaye is the Mekil and Rav is the Mach. What's the case? The case is a Suffolk Mamzer. So yeah, without going through right now all the nitty-gritty details, it's a Suffolk ben Shiva L'Rishon, that's the late brother who died. And if this Ubar is a ben Shiva L'Rishon, Rishon meaning the brother that died, then there's no Yibur. Which would mean, let's say the first brother's name is Reuven, when Shimon consummates a marriage relationship with the wife of Reuven, the child is going to be a mamzer, because there's no yibum if it's a ben shiva l'rishon, and that gives her the status of an eshes ach, the child of which is a mamzer. It's chayve krisis, and the child is a mamzer. If on the other hand it's a ben tesha l'sheni, if Shimon is the father of this baby, then she, the wife of Reuven, fell for yibum, and the status of the blood is that he's a kosher. Again, there are a lot of complicated mathematical calculations here, which confused me for about a day or two. But the bottom line is we have a Suffolk Mams. Comes along Abaye in interpreting Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds that since he's a Suffolk Mamzer, which means we downgrade his status in Yuchsin, such that he cannot marry a kosher, an Isha Kshera, we're going to allow him, I don't mean we, it means the Torah, is going to allow this Suffolk Mamzer to marry a Mamzeres, which means that the Suffolk is upgraded to the status of a Vada. That is the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. And we have a principle, if you remember yesterday, we said that Mishnas Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Kavanot, we always pass like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, even against the Chachamim, and therefore Abaye says halacha ki Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and therefore he's allowed to marry a mamzeres. Imagine a Suffolk mamzer is allowed to marry a mamzeres, which is a pella when you think about it, just on a mathematical level, because on the side that he was in fact a ben Sheva L'Rishon, a ben Tisha L'Sheni, he can't marry a mamzeres. He's a kosher. But since he has a Suffolk mamzer situation, because maybe he's a ben Shiva L'Rishon, which means that the marriage relationship between Shimon and Ashes Reuven is that of an erev of Ashes Achiv, then on that side he can marry a mamzer. So we're talking about a vade mamzeres, and we're talking about a Suffolk mamzer. The Suffolk mamzer, according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov in Abaye, is allowed to marry a vade mamzeres. And that means that we're going to accept the Shita of Shmuel. Abaye is going to accept the Shita of Shmuel, who in turn accepts the Shita of Hillel. And Hillel was the one who listed an Asufi and a Shtuki as two categories of individuals that can marry one the other, the male and the female, obviously. But what it means is that even though they're Sveikos, we can be matir them, because a Suffolk Mamzer is like a Vade Mamzer. And if we accept Allah like Hillel, which Shmuel in fact did, and Abaye did as well, then in order to reconcile that with the principle that we always pass like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, we're going to have to assume that even Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov accepted this principle that a Suffolk Mamzer is like a Vada. Again, not to marry a kosher, but to marry a Vade Mamzer. Omar Abaye Mina Midala. So that was all just an introduction, so that we can have an easy departure. He says, Mina Midale Dechol Sveika. Le Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Kivadai Mashvile. Where do I derive this conclusion from? Tisanya, we learned in the Bryce. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer Harei Sheba al Noshim Harbe. V'en Yodea al Eze Mehen Ba. So he had a relationship with many different women, but he can't identify which women he had a relationship with. Now we have a flip side. Sheba ala Noshim Harbe. A woman had a relationship with many different men. V'en Yodas. She cannot identify Eze Mehen. Kibla means she became pregnant. So there's no way of identifying the father. And again, in the case where a man had a relationship with many women and he doesn't know which one might be the one that he had a relationship with. So if a woman, we'll call her Miss X, if she gives birth, we don't know if he's the father of that child. So in this case, Nimtza of Noseis Bito, there's a possibility here that a man might marry his own daughter because he doesn't know whether he's the father of this girl or not. The Ach Noseis Achosa, or in the next generation, you have a boy and a girl, they get married, he might be marrying his own sister. And therefore, Nismali Kolom Kuli Mamzerim, the Brisa gets very high. Hyperbole here, that maybe the whole world is going to be full of mamzerim, all because of this situation that began in which we don't know how to identify the father. It's interesting, the Ramban, in one of his commentaries on Chumash, says that the reason why the Torah is so strict about the laws of adultery and so forth and so on is because if we're going to allow for an immoral kind of life, we'll never know who's related to who. And the reason why the Torah says Kaved es Avicha is because we assume in the Jewish people that there's no such thing as this kind of immorality, that this is his father. We're not going to raise a question about who the father, that made this woman pregnant is. It's definitely her husband, because we are committed to the moral law. But here's a case where, unfortunately, the situation arises. As we know, man is built with the Yetzer Hara, so there is no morality going on here. Without the uphold of morality, we don't know who the father is. It's a loose kind of community. And from this, you could have a situation, Ki'ilu nitzmale kol olam kulam mamzerim. When the Torah gives us in Parshas Acharei Mos the list of immoral relations, it adds a very dramatic phrase, Umola Oretz Zima. And what does the word Zima mean? It has two meanings. Zima means immorality, and it also means mamzeros. So again, even though it's only a suffix, this brisa, quoting Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, considers it like a vada, like this Mali Kol Olam Kula Mamzerim. How could Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov use such a hyperbole, such a dramatic phrase? We're not dealing with vade mamzerim. I can't identify a vade mamzer. I can't tell you that this man had a relationship with his daughter, or this brother had a relationship with his sister, and the child, therefore, got pregnancy, and she gave birth to a mamzer. I don't know that. You could call it a suffix. And yet, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, "Mismalia olam kula mamzerim," and the Abai takes that very literally, that we're talking about mamzeros. A very bad allergist. I don't know why. Just give me a minute here. Sorry. So again, is it Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov who maintains the position that a suffix mamzer is like a vade mamzer? Abai says, yes, I can identify it based on this brisa. it is none other than Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov himself that classifies and defines a suffix mamzer as a vadik mamzer, and I see it in the language of Nismale Kol Olam Kula Mamzer. Now let's backtrack. That was Abaye's shita in Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. But Rava was of the opinion that we paskin that a suffix mamzer is a suffix with all the chumras involved, and you can't allow a suffix mamzer to marry a vadik mamzer. And since we paskin like that, which means that Rava holds like Rav. Rav holds like Rabbi Elazar. Again, let's not get confused. This is not Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. This is Rabbi Elazar the Tana, who said, maintain the position that a suffix mamzer is not allowed to marry a suffix mamzer. So we go into the laws of Sveikos, and we always have to be machmir mitzad suffix. And Rav passes like Rabbi Elazar. And Rava says we accept the halach of Rav against Shmuel. Shmuel was building his case on Hillel, who allowed a Sufi and a Shtuki to intermarry. But we pass like Rav, not like Shmuel. And Rav in turn stands on the shoulders of Rabbi Elazar, and suffix mamzer is considered a suffix mamzer. And in order to now reconcile the halacha of Rav with Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, because we always pass like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, we have to assume that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds that suffix mamzer l'chumra is asur. He's not a vade mamzer. He's a suffix mamzer. He can't marry a mamzeres vada. So what would Rava say about this brisa? How will he answer the language of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, who says Nismale kol olam kula mamzerim amalecha hachikom? This is what Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov meant. He wanted to interpret the word zima, right? The pasuk says umal'ah haaretz zima, and what is zima? So mahi. This is what we call a notrikin, when you take a longer word and you break it down into its smaller component parts. Zo mahi. What is she? Which means we don't know what she is. Is she his sister? Is she not? Is it his daughter? Is it not? And that generates a suffix. So since we don't know where this child was born from and who the father was, we cannot identify the father. This is Molei Ha'aretz Zima. What is the word Zima? Zumahi. The world is now populated by suffix mamzerim, which according to Rava's psak based on Rav, which is based on Rabbi Elazar, is even more chamerdik than a vade mamzer. At least a vade mamzer can marry a mamzeres. A suffix mamzer can't even marry a mamzeres. And can't marry another suffix mamzer. As we said before, Shtuki can't marry an Asufi. And the conclusion, again, I hope I'm correct about this, is that according to Rava's psak in Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the only person a suffix mamzer is allowed to marry is a gioris. Not another suffix mamzer, and certainly not another vade mamzer, and certainly not a kosher, but only a gioris, which might be good news for converts. At least they know that for a marriage pool, in the case of a suffix mamzer, that's all they can get access to is a beheter is the gioris. Now we stopped in the middle of a brisa to offer both Abaye and Rava's interpretation of the brisa. Now we continue with the brises. So, yes, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Lo yisa adam isha b'medina su, v'yelech v'yisa isha b'medina acheres. Because in one Medina, they don't know that he's married to another woman in a different Medina and vice versa. Shema, yizdavgu zeh lo zeh. Maybe he'll have a daughter from a marriage we'll call it in Asia, and then he'll have a son from a marriage in Eretz Israel, and the son, and they don't know what's going on, and you're going to have a brother marry a sister. Shemi is dav guzel is evidence ach no say es achosa. Now, we have to ask the following question. What happens, Nebuch, if a man loses his wife? Or for that matter, if he divorces his wife? So you're going to tell me he can't go to another country to marry another woman? I mean, if you're afraid that a brother might not know that this is his sister, etc., because it's two different Medinos. He had a wife in this Medina on one side of the earth, and he has another wife on the other side of the earth. So that should apply logically, even in a case where a man divorces his wife in Medina X, he can't get married to another woman in Medina Y. So the one who asked this question was the base mayor. He lived at the time of Kivega, that's about 180 years ago. He was the Rav of a city called Posen. And he has a very intense and comprehensive commentary on Even HaEzer, the laws of marriage. And he says the following: Kol ha'isur hu dafka kasher nosei isha al ishta. He's still married to his first wife. He's taking a second wife, which probably means that it's before Cherem Rabbeinu Gershom, or it's after Cherem Rabbeinu Gershom. Before Cherem Rabbeinu Gershom makes sense because the time of the Gemara, they didn't know from Cherem Rabbeinu Gershom. Right? Cherem Rabbeinu Gershom is probably, and I'm exaggerating, but 1,000 years later. He says, "Aval Mesa Ishta O Girsha Ein Boze Is." Why? Mishum Shebederach Klal Mesa O Girsha Ulokech Es Bonov Ubnosov Imo. Wow, this is interesting. When a man takes another wife in another country, so he's raising two families. He's got children here and children there. And they might not know about the other children there. So they, all of a sudden they go out to the market to get married and they marry their own brother. They don't know because the two families are separated. But generally speaking, says the base mayor, when a person divorces his wife or loses his wife here, and then he goes to the other side of the world to create a new family, he's going to take his old family, his original family with him. So there'll be stepbrothers, not stepbrothers, I think you'd call them paternal brothers, that are being raised together, or paternal brother and sister, and they know that they share the same father. Now, after the base mayor comes the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan is about 40 years ago, 150 years ago. And he says that according to the base mayor, if he doesn't take his family with him, like let's say, for example, they're mature and independent, they're 18-year-olds or I don't know what, then he's not allowed to marry a woman in another country, according to Din and the Gemara. Says the Aruch HaShulchan, Lo shamanu she'izaru was it. We never heard a halachic, some sort of halachic work that formulates a zahirus that a person who divorces his wife and he now moves to another country has to take his children with him. So in order to justify this blanket heter of a man to go ahead and marry a woman in another country without taking his children from the first marriage along with him, he says that we have to assume that bismanenu, in our time, we're not so afraid of this whole Gzera business. Why? He says, Yesh Doar. Can you imagine? 100 and so many years ago, probably 150 years ago, a little less, he's talking about Doar. Today, if you want to go to a Doar, you have to find, like the last 4 post offices that are left in the whole city of Yerushalayim. So we have more sophisticated ways of transmitting messages. Yesh doar, umemayr larutz b'chol yom b'chol ha'olam. So you can send international post. So the word gets back and forth from one country to another. The rachok, it's very improbable, statistically, me'ametzius, sheha'ov shemedina cheres lo yikabel tadir mechtavim bizarro sheniach b'medina zu. They can tell me he's not getting letters from his children. I know in our family, I don't know if you have this. You remember the old aerograms? I mean, you're really dating yourself. Anyway, if you know the aerogram, we still have some aerograms from like 50 years ago, more probably. I don't know how many years ago, that was sent, internationally. Like, for example, I learned in a yeshiva called Keren B'Yavne after high school when I was 18. There was like one phone for thousands of people. So to communicate with our parents, we had two choices. Either we schlepped from Yavne to Yerushalayim to the Dor Merkazi, and then you waited online for a couple of hours to get an international phone. And then after that, they tell you, Kol Amadot Tfusot, everything's busy. So you took a trip back to Yavne. So you spent the whole day and you couldn't speak to your parents. Your other option was to send an aerogram. Remember that? He says that children are constantly sending aerograms to their parents in a different Medina and back and forth. They realized through the aerograms that they have new siblings, paternal brother or sister. Now, is the Aruch HaShulchan telling us, which I think he is, but I can't promise you, that this whole Gemara that we're learning now is no longer relevant today? You can marry a woman in another country. And if you have children from that, you're going to get mail, and everybody knows about the children from one country to the other. Anyway, so the Gemara says, Eini, is this really true? Are we afraid that he might have children from another wife in another country, and therefore we have to prohibit him from marrying a woman in another country? But Rav, now the Gemara tells a story about Rav. Ikla means he chanced upon another place, Lidardashir. And I think I saw this before in another Gemara that Rav used to go to Dardashir. Let's just see if he has anything here. It's a Gemara in Yuma on Daf Yud Ches. That's where Rav used to go very often. He used to give shiurim there and teach Torah there, disseminate the word of God. So now Machriz V'Yom, Rav makes the following public statement that's going to stir up a whole raucous. Man havya liyoma, who would want to marry me for just one day? It's a mind-boggling Gemara. Because of the Yetzer Hara, when a person is far away from his wife in a foreign city, Rav wanted to have a way of satiating his Yetzer Hara, what we call taivas niyuv, but he wanted to do it legally. Is there any woman here who's willing to marry me just for one day? And it wasn't just Rav. Apparently, this kind of a behavior pattern was somewhat common back in the day. V'Rav Nachman ki ikla l'shchansiv, that's where he used to hang out very often to teach Torah. Machriz v'yomar man havya liyoma. Who will be my wife for a day? So now the Gemara is asking the following question. If he's married to a woman for a day in this other city, she might get pregnant from his marriage, and the children will not know that they have siblings in Rav's or Rav Nachman's original location. Why isn't this behavior of both Rav and Rav Nachman in contrast, what's the word I'm looking for? In conflict with the ruling that we have of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov? And it doesn't make sense that Rav and Rav Nachman would violate the dictum and the psak of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So the Gemara answers, Shani Rabbanan de P'kiyei Shmayayu. If Rav or Rav Nachman would father a child, everybody's going to know about that. Everyone knows that that child is the child of Rav. Rav is the Gadol Adar, and his name is public. And certainly if he had a child, it would be public knowledge. Everyone would know that child is the offspring of Rav.
But this whole story couldn't have happened because the woman had to have Zayni kid before the custom.
Right. That's a sugya that's going to come up now. It's also sugya Yuma. Correct. In any event, just at this stage of the Gemara, before the Gemara's kasha, which David is already raising Gemara's kasha, the Gemara is assuming that in the case of this famous public figure of Rav, who comes to the city because the city needs him to disseminate Torah and answer their questions and so forth, any child that he would have, everybody knows that's the child of Rav. So Gemara asks, there's something called Dam Chibur. This was a big issue during Corona, but with regard to marriage. You know, in some cases during Corona, the decision for the chuppah was made overnight. I might be exaggerating, but not by much. And the problem is Dam Chibur, that when you marry a woman, the assumption is that she might have dam just as an emotional response to the excitement of marriage. So if you know in advance when the marriage is going to take place, then she'll have dam nidus, and then you'll schedule the wedding for afterwards. But to schedule a wedding within that short period of time is a serious problem of dam chibur. It doesn't mean that the marriage is not valid, but it means they'll have to be porage, and they cannot consummate the marriage. In any event, we have a statement here of Rava that you cannot just consummate a marriage, with the snap of a finger. You've got to have at least 7 days of Nikiyim in advance because of Dam Chibur. Or if there weren't 7 days in advance, then after the marriage, you cannot consummate the marriage for 7 days. Here, Rav consummated the marriage on the very same day that she agreed to marry him, whoever she was. So the Gemara says, Rabbanan shluchayu havi mishadrei modi'elu. Already a week in advance, before Rav or Rav Nachman came to the city, knowing with their schedule that they would be there for the public shiurim that they gave, they sent out word which woman. And so there was a woman already a week in advance who was designated to be the wife of Rav. That's called shluchayu havi mishadrei. They used to send shlichim. This is not a Chabad shlichus. This is a different kind of a shlichus. They sent shlichus to notify the women in that town that Rav is coming to town. He's looking for a one-day marriage. I can offer you an alternative answer. That in truth, Rav never consummated the marriage. This is a principle called pas b'salo. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Literally, it's an idiomatic phrase in Chazal. He's got his bread in his basket, meaning Rav wanted to make sure that he wouldn't have any thoughts about a woman, if he met a woman over there in his stay. But if he knew that he had a wife, because this woman, whoever she was, took him up on the offer to be his wife for a day, then it already was pas b'salo, and all he would do is designated her as a wife, And that already took off his Yetzer Hara, to look at another woman. He's a married man. So that's what he says here in the translations. Chachamim hayu nosim noshim u'misyachadim imohem ach lo nizkakim. They did not have any interest. Yomar mishe eino dom mishe yesh lo pas b'sal lemishe ein lo pas b'sal. So it's really interesting because normally you're not allowed to have yichud with a woman who's also be'isur kares. And if we have to be worried about dam chibud, because now in the inami, the Vasema, we're not saying that the shluchim came a week in advance, so she might in fact be a nida. Is he allowed to have yichud with a nida? The Gemara says yichude bi'alma hu de bi'achtele. So I believe that the answer to this question is that there's no Isur Yichud with one's wife. So once he was legally married to her, there's no Isur Yichud, even if she's a Nida. But the only problem is, the Gemara says in Ksubas, that only applies if they once, on one occasion, they had consummated the marriage. But before they consummate the marriage for one day, for one occasion, so she was what's called a Chupas Nida, then Hu Yoshe Bein Hanoshim, Vehi Yeshena Bein Hanoshim. They can't sleep together. They can't sleep in the same room together. And there's no head to yichud. So how could it be that yichudi huda biyachtinle, and that would solve the problem of dam chimud, that maybe she's a nida? So he quotes here Rav Pelaji, who is, I think, the gadol in, trying to remember, I think in Morocco. No, I don't want to sound like an Amartz. Where was Rav Pelaji? Okay, I'll remember. He says, osan below bo'aleim. Oh, he's bothered by a different question. Bittul mitzvahs ono. Oh, here it is. Tosis in Yuma, on the original sugya here of Rav, on Daf Yuches, Hikshu b'Tosis im lo ba'alu, ech hutar lehem litzyachid imam, or in his bar b'ksubas Daf Daled, shem pirsan ishtod nida, v'adayin lo ba'al, hu yoshin ben anoshim, v'hi yeshena ben anoshim, v'ech yuchal litzyachid imam. I'm afraid to tell you his answer because it's revolutionary. Oh, so I'm skipping the Rashba's answer because it's not something that I could fathom here, that a Talmud Chacham is allowed to have yichud even before the Bir Rishon. Okay, that's too much for me. But Tosfos gives the following answer. He says that even according to the Ibais Ema, she would know that there's not going to be a consummation of the marriage, that it's only going to be yichud. And therefore, there's no chashash of dam chibud. Mitchila amru lahem shekavanasam rak litzyachid imam v'lo livo v'lachein lo hayu roz dam machmas chibud. So dam chibud is only a reality if she anticipates an intimate relationship. Okay, we'll just read two more lines and that'll complete the sugya for us.
Why can't you say it's Russian?
Say it again?
Why can't you say it's if he married is Russian?
I don't know. Why would a grusha be different? There's no dam chibud by a grusha? I don't know that.
I thought so.
I think Dam Chibud is always a problem. But keep in mind also, he made an announcement. Man Havi Li Liyoma. I know it sounds like he was inviting anyone. I don't know why she would agree to such a marriage. That's what bothers my mind. But I guess to help out Rav, or to be able to say on your resume that I was once married to Rav. I don't know. I don't know if that enhances your marriageability or not. I don't know. Anyway, Tana, we learned in the Brisa, Rabbi Lezman Yaakov Omer Lo Yisa Adam Ishto V'Daito Legarsha. This is already an agadic statement, so to speak. I mean, it's really a halachic statement, but it's already on more of a it's a jump off to another. Once we're talking about situations in which a man should not marry a woman. So here's a case where a man marries a woman and his intention is to divorce her. Why would a man marry a woman with the intention of divorcing her? So that probably has to do with financial considerations. And now the Gemara is wondering here about Rav, in a sense that Rav is marrying a woman for one day. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov derives this principle of Lo Yisad of each of the Daitel Gach from a pasuk in Mishnah. Mishum shenemar al tachrosh al reacha ra v'hu yoshev lebetach itach. In other words, he relies on you as a man relies on his friend. He's totally reliant on you. So don't have machshavas ra'os, evil thoughts to mete out something evil against the person who's relying on you. And here also, al tachrosh rea leisha sheni yadash daito legarsha. She's relying on you for a marriage relationship, and now your intention is to divorce her. Okay, Rabbi, so this is where we'll stop for today. Let's just make a note of it. Tomorrow is Thursday, correct? Okay. Yeah, I wish everyone a great day, and it's great to have you back, Steve. Okay, cool.